everyone, and welcome again to one of our library virtual events. We have Mr. Charlie Ayers today from Workforce Solutions of Central Texas, and he has got some really interesting information for us today. We're going to find out all about the jobs of Central Texas, specific details, and hopefully he can give us some insight into what jobs are something we should be going for. So, thank you so much for visiting with us today. We're just so happy to be here with you. Um, just go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. As you mentioned, I'm Charlie Ayers. For those of you that are joining us, I am the Director of Industry and Education Partnerships. And we thought we'd take just a little bit of time today to talk about the economics and the job growth of Central Texas. And so we're going to jump right into that. I have some slides that I'm going to share with you. But as we're walking through this, feel free to ask a question and that'll be delivered to me. We'll stop and discuss that. We want it to be very informal, but I certainly want to be able to answer your questions as we go. So let's get this started right here and get to sharing. Here we go. All right. We'll jump right into this. I will tell you what has happened in recent years is more than ever before, workforce has become the primary driver of our economy. I put this quote up on the screen so you could see it because more than ever, employers are looking at the skill sets of their employees, their education, their training, their experience. And it wasn't very long ago that when a company was looking to expand or relocate into an area, they would go to a community and they would want to know, for example, is there land available, or what kind of incentives can they get by coming to that community, whether that's tax abatements or cash grants. And now what has happened in the last few years is companies, when they look to move into a community, they want to know about the workforce and what types of colleges do you have in your area, and what are the school districts like, and what's the skill sets of some of the residents in that area. So it's significant, and you're going to see as we walk through the presentation how Central Texas has been impacted by the ever-changing workforce, and the simple fact that one of the things that makes us significant is that we're a geographical oddity. And we'll explain what that is as we get a little further in the presentation. So I want to make sure you understand what we're talking about when we say Central Texas, because Central Texas means a lot of things to a lot of different people. For example, I was born and raised in Austin, Texas, and when you're in Austin, everybody says they're in Central Texas. But as it is defined by the state, the region of Central Texas is the 7 counties that you see on the screen. And those 7 counties are the 7 counties that Workforce Solutions of Central Texas serves. So you can see that it is part of Central Texas College service area, but their service area does go beyond what is defined by the state as Central Texas. And it takes in a little bit of Temple College service area, are the counties that we serve. The cities that you see that I've highlighted on that map, Lampasas, Killeen, Temple, and Rockdale, are the cities where we actually have a career center. And so there is a Workforce Solutions of Central Texas office that you can go to get help with resume writing or interview skills, or even job search. And even if you qualify for some of the grant programming that we have, which many of our grant programs will help fund not only your training, but many times people complete industry recognized certifications and they need specific pieces of equipment or safety gear. And sometimes if you meet the criteria, you can have that equipment provided for you if you've completed one of those industry certifications. But you would need to contact one of our staff in the career centers to get some help with that. But that's just to kind of give you the lay of the land so you have a working knowledge of kind of what Central Texas is and where the Workforce Solution offices are. So a quick regional overview. Central Texas continues to grow. You see here our population is just over 500,000 people now. And the population grew by 36,908 over the last 5 years. We take that for granted a lot of times because when you are in Central Texas or actually anywhere in Texas, you get used to growth. I mean, you constantly see homes being built. You constantly see new restaurants coming in and new shopping centers coming in. But there are many parts of the country that do not experience that kind of growth. As a matter of fact, in the last census that we had, the 2020 census, the two other large states that compete with Texas a lot in economic development, California and New York, both lost population over the last few years. And so more people are moving to the southern states, or what's known as the Sun Belt. And Texas and Florida are experiencing a lot of that growth. We're projected to grow by 40,000 people over the next 5 years. So you can see that that growth is going to continue. And we do that well also in employment. 205,000 jobs, or just over 205,000 jobs currently. And you can see on the screen that the jobs grew by 919 jobs over the last 5 years. And there's projected growth in the next 5 years. And the average earnings, as you can see, are a little below the national average. We're going to talk about this a little bit later in the presentation, why $58,600 a year, excuse me, is relevant because a lot of this has to do with cost of living. And cost of living, the cost of living index impacts that number a great deal. And sometimes you'll see in certain sectors of the country, $72,000 per year is not as much money as you think it would be because of the cost of living in that particular region or area. So let's talk about unemployment trends. You can see that starting in 2016, we were just below 5%. And we stayed there. I think if everyone looks at this chart, you can kind of see when the pandemic hit and we locked some stuff down. And if you remember, many of our businesses closed unless they were considered essential businesses. And in Texas, that lasted about 30 or 60 days before we began to reopen. Or you may remember that a lot of our retailers and restaurants and others begin to get a little creative, and they had curbside service or delivery or pickup. That was during a time that you saw services like DoorDash and Waiter increase their workforce a great deal because people started ordering stuff from restaurants and having it brought to their house. But we got up to just over 7% unemployment. We've begun to come down every month now, and we're almost back below 5% currently. And so our economy has remained strong even when we saw some significant unemployment rates. The interesting thing about Central Texas is during the whole pandemic, even though many of our businesses were not open to the public and they were trying to find ways to do business and continue to grow, our economy continued to grow even with the pandemic. Almost every county in our region had increased sales tax revenue because of how strong the business was in Central Texas. So it was a very interesting dynamic that happened. And you probably haven't been to a restaurant, Killeen, Temple, Belton, Gatesville, almost anywhere, and haven't seen a hiring now sign or a help wanted sign, because they are still struggling to try to get many of the employees that they need. And what has happened is during the pandemic and the initial investment that the federal government has poured into the economy, people have taken that opportunity to change careers or to upskill or to go back to school and pursue something else. Even probably businesses that you're very familiar with, such as Grocery, have expanded their workforce, because I don't know that you've gone into one of our local grocery stores and not seen grocery store employees with big carts walking through the aisles shopping, placing items on the cart, and they're now personal shoppers in our grocery store because people use the curbside grocery service now. They place their order online, then they go to the grocery store and pick it up. And so they've expanded their workforce by having personal shoppers. And so those are new jobs that were created through the pandemic that you didn't see that much of before we had that experience. So unemployment rate continues to drop. It continues to go down. That's a good thing. If you were to take anything from our little visit today, remember this: there is no quality of life without a job. Somehow you need to earn revenue, and there's many different forms to do that. But quality of life certainly comes through being able to be independent, take care of yourself, pay your bills, and meet your needs. So we're always glad to see the unemployment rate going down and people finding careers that they're interested in. So here's what the job postings look like the last 30 days. So this is literally the month of September, and this is by county, as you can tell. So for example, in Bell County, there were 18,246 job postings by employers. Those are unique job postings. That's the analytics on this, is that duplicates are removed, and it's just counts single jobs and not multiples of that job. So you can still see that in most of the counties, there are certainly jobs available, but there's a good number of jobs out there. So for individuals that are trying to get into the workforce or start a career, my suggestion to you is I would go to workintexas.com. You can actually even search those jobs by county or by workforce region. The workforce region that you're in, just to remind you, is Central Texas. But whatever your county is, you can search those jobs by county and literally pull up the jobs in your area that are available. So still significant if you're looking for a change or if you're looking for a little more income. There's a lot of opportunity out there, as you can tell just from the last 30 days. A total of 23,000 jobs have been posted. Again, as I said earlier, there are so many communities in the United States that would love to have this type of problem. They literally are closing factories or closing manufacturing facilities because of the economy and because of the workforce. So pretty significant activity. And if you go to your the career center closest to you, they can certainly help you navigate some of these positions. So let's talk about unique population characteristics. This is something that makes us a geographical oddity. Veterans, 66,806 veterans live in Central Texas. So if you took a region our size, if you took that demographic and that per capita number, an area our size has 66,000. Usually the national average for an area of this size is 28,000. So you can see we have almost 3 times as many veterans as a typical community or region our size. That's significant because there's not only a lot of good programs for veterans and help in getting veterans connected to the civilian world as they transition, but also many employers really like to hire veterans. And it's not just because there may be special programming for the employers to do that. The employers have told me that they have found that hiring a veteran has really paid dividends to their company, because many of our veterans, they understand the concept of team, they understand dedication, commitment to a job, and they typically have very good leadership skills. So that is a plus for our area. And then if you look at millennials, I know we all have a millennial story, or we want to talk about how millennials are different than everybody else. We're fortunate because millennials are one of our trump cards. Typically, a region our size has about 105,000 millennials. We have 118,000 millennials in our region. So a couple of things that's significant about that. The millennials are the largest generation ever born in America. They hold first place even above the baby boomers, which for years had been the largest generation. Which, if you know much about generational studies, the baby boomers were kind of those babies that came out of World War II. And the millennials are now the largest generation that's born. And the interesting thing about the millennials is they're not only the largest generation that was born in America, but they are also the most diverse generation ever born in America. So the diversity and just the sheer numbers really put us in a significant place for that workforce, because I will tell you, in most of the industrialized countries across the globe currently, every year they're losing workforce, and they're losing it in some areas of the world, like for Brazil, for example, double digit percentages, they're losing workforce. In other words, either their population has gotten older and they've retired from the workforce, or they're not replacing their population with new births, and so they don't have the numbers to meet the needs of the workforce. So that's what makes the United States extremely competitive in a world market, is not only the highly skilled and highly trained individuals that we have, but the fact that we have many of these individuals that are still working age adults and that are still trying to provide for families. So a very significant thing about Central Texas is we have a good a substantial number of that population. You can see that millennials are now like 25 to 39. Most of them have kids, and most of them have kids in school. I always tell everyone the most significant thing a community can ever do regarding economic development is to take care of your public schools and your colleges, and your community colleges specifically, because education is not only the key to us as individuals, but education is also the key to a healthy economy. So that's one of the reasons why Central Texas College is so critical and so important to Central Texas and to our community, is because businesses look at that and they see that that asset is there and that we can continue to grow. And people want to bring their families to regions where there's a strong education infrastructure. I tell people all the time, being raised in Austin, it's really, 6th Street is really cool until you have kids. And then you start wanting to know about, okay, so I need to find a school district that I'm comfortable with my kids being in, some amateur sports. I'm looking for some parks. I really want a good environment for my family to be raised in. These are some of the things that millennials look at after they begin to have kids, and how does that impact their families. So some very, very interesting and unique population characteristics of Central Texas that really make it unique for us and make us significant when we start talking about economic development and growth. Excuse me. Education attainment. So you can see these numbers. Some of them were a little low on, some of them were better than the national average. So for example, graduate degrees, 8% of Central Texas have a graduate degree or higher. That's about 3 points lower than the national average. And in the bachelor's degree, you can see 15% of Central Texas residents possess a bachelor's degree. And that's about 2% or 3% lower than the national average, kind of depending on the regions you look at. But these are significant numbers. And I think part of what lends itself to our numbers being a little lower than what the nation numbers are is even though there's buildings there and it certainly continues to grow, Texas A&M Central Texas is our 4-year public university for our region. And it's still, by school standards, not a very old institution. I think we'll see these numbers continue to grow as their programs grow, and as our community colleges like Central Texas College and Temple College begin to build programs and pathways that help connect Texas A&M Central Texas to the education that you can receive at Central Texas College, for example. So you get your associate's degree, and all of a sudden you decide you want to be a director of nurses instead of just a nurse. Many times that requires a bachelor's or a master's, and so then you can pursue that at Texas A&M Central Texas. Our associate degrees, you see 11% hold an associate degree. That's actually 3 points higher than the national average. And that's just because Central Texas College is so awesome. They're outscoring everyone, but both Temple College and Central Texas College have done very well with our career training and even preparing students to go on to 4 years. We do have a private university in our region, the University of Mary Hardin Baylor. And so between them and Texas A&M Central Texas, they've been great feeder schools for both Central Texas College and Temple College. This is a key that employers look at, but I'll tell you the most significant thing about the education, and this is something that you can get some help with at one of the workforce centers, is the education really needs to align with what you want your career choice to be. Because there literally are some careers that you can just go to Central Texas College, complete a certification or complete an associate's degree, and you can make $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. With just that amount of education, a couple of years committed to that. But depending on the occupation, depending on the industry sector, there are some jobs that literally about 80% of the workers in that field have a bachelor's degree. And I know you're thinking, well, if 80% of them have a bachelor's degree, well, then there's somebody that doesn't have a bachelor's degree. The problem with that is, though, is the competition is so strong, you put yourself in a better place if you walk in the door with the bachelor's degree, since the bulk of those people have a bachelor's degree. You really do end up coming in with a short end that you walk in, and maybe you have the skill set and maybe you have experience, but you don't have that certificate to show that you put in the time and the effort in a 4-year institution. It may impact your ability to land that job, or it may impact what that employer is willing to pay you. So sometimes it's more important to kind of look at what is it that you're wanting to pursue. A good example for that in our region is many of our IT jobs, computer science, technology jobs. A lot of those employers literally just want to see that you have the skill set and you know how to write the code. And if you do that, they'll hire you. But certainly if you're not up to speed on that, that's something you would want to further your education in, so you could put yourself in the best position to be successful when you walked in for that interview. But education attainment is strong in Central Texas. Our school district, public school districts and colleges continue to be strong, and we continue to see a lot of growth in that area. I know currently Academy ISD, Killeen ISD, Temple ISD are just a few of the school districts that have like active bond programs to expand schools or campuses just because of growth. And that goes back to that population growth that we looked at in the earlier slide, because as you probably can figure out, the more rooftops typically will bring children with them. Children need to go to school. That requires more schools, more teachers. So we'll continue to see this education sector grow, and we'll continue to see the achievement and the attainment in education grow also as our schools expand their programming and their opportunities. So let's talk about the largest industries in Central Texas. So you can see by far in Central Texas, government is the largest industry. Now this includes Fort Hood. Those are government jobs. This includes any city or county job. Those are all government jobs, which you can see kind of what the national average for government jobs in a region our size is about 30,000. You can see we're doubled that. But it's also worth mentioning that not only because of Fort Hood, which incidentally is, the largest military base or army base in the free world, so it's very significant to our economy. But we also have the 4th largest VA medical center in the United States in Temple, Texas. So between the VA medical center and Fort Hood and many of the other support businesses for our transitioning military and our current military, it really adds to that government sector. And then healthcare, you see our healthcare is a little bit smaller than a region our size, but healthcare, retail trade, accommodation, construction. Those are the 5 largest industries in our region. And you can see how healthcare, retail trade, accommodation, food service, and construction really follow the trend of population growth. They're very much aligned with rooftops. You'll always see those grow. Healthcare continues to be a very strong industry sector, but as I said earlier, what's driving healthcare is all the baby boomers are approaching retirement age. And it doesn't just happen when you retire, but it tends to be more common when you retire. You require more medical attention. You're getting older. You need more prescriptions. You go to the doctor more often. And so that population growth in the baby boomers is really driving the need for healthcare occupations and the growth of the healthcare industry. Probably the biggest thing that jumps out in Central Texas is we have a huge shortage of nurses. That's really not unique. That doesn't necessarily make us a geographical oddity because there's a lot of parts of our country that have nursing shortages. But it's something that I can tell you this, even with the nursing programs we have at all of our institutions, we can't train enough nurses that there are open jobs for. I mean, we just don't have the capacity. You wouldn't be able to put that many people in a class. We don't have that many instructors, and we don't have that many nursing programs to meet that need. So it's going to be a constant challenge to try to meet those numbers. But it is one of those occupations that continues to grow. And because of there being such a great need for them, nurses make very good money because they're hard to come by. So that's just one of those areas that you'll see continue to grow. And those are the 5 largest occupations, our largest industries in our region. So let's talk about what our competitive advantages is, or what our competitive advantage is in Central Texas, because we definitely have one. For about the last 10 years before I came on staff with Workforce, I worked in economic development. And basically my job was to go around the country, and I flew to New York and California, all Midwest, different places. And I tried to recruit companies to move to Central Texas. And it literally was like a sales pitch and why they needed to be in Central Texas instead of Southern California. And we definitely have some competitive advantages that I want to just go over with you real quick, so you're aware of that and you can see how that may work to your advantage. Talk about this real quick. So we mentioned earlier cost of living. So the cost of living index is done every quarter. And each quarter, there's an organization that sends out, for lack of a better term, they send out a shopping list to every metro area. So we are in the Killeen Temple metro area. That metro area gets that shopping list, and the shopping list is very specific. It will literally say 1 gallon Borden whole milk. And you have to go to 5 different grocery stores in the metro area and write down the price of that milk. That being said, there's everything on there from a gallon of milk to an oil change in your car to a doctor's office visit. It's a very diverse list, and there's typically 4 or 5 pricing models from each business area. You fill that shopping list out, you send it back in, and they develop an index from that list. And that is what is known as the cost of living index. And each region does that. So if you looked at 100, 100 is the baseline. That's the American average. 100 is the baseline. So when you look at Killeen, Temple, Texas metro area, you see that it says 87.7. That's the cost of living index. In other words, it is 13% lower than the American average. So your money goes further in Killeen and Temple than it does in most other places in the United States. So for example, take a look at New York, New York. New York, New York is 180.5 cost of living index. So that means it's 80% higher to live in New York than it is on the American average. So here's what happens a lot of times. Folks will look at job ads and they'll see, oh, I can go to Los Angeles, California, and they're paying computer game designers $110,000 a year. And in Dallas, they're paying them $70,000 a year. Well, I'm going to go to Los Angeles so I can make more money. The problem is $110,000 a year in Los Angeles, you may be getting some food stamps because it's not comparable to the cost of living. It ends up costing more of your salary in regards to house payment, groceries, well, any of the living expenses, whether it's utilities or car payments. It impacts all of your budget. So with that being said, some years ago, I was in San Jose, California, and I was visiting with an industrial engineer. And I was trying to get him to move his company to Temple, Texas. And he told me that he currently made $180,000 a year, and he was having trouble making his house payment. He literally told me his home was 1,600 square foot. It was a frame house that was built in the 70s, and it cost him $875,000. So you can kind of get a sense of what cost of living means, because what he wanted to know is, could he make a good living in Central Texas if he sold his house? Could he find a house for less than $175,000 in Central Texas? And I did tell him, by the way, for $875,000, you can have acres of land on Lake Belton with your house on a cliff. I mean, you're not built into a little neighborhood with a little frame 1970s house. So the cost of living is significant. That is one of our competitive advantages, is that it is extremely, extremely economical to live in Central Texas. The last quarterly report that came out, they do a list of kind of like top 10 the most expensive place in the United States to purchase groceries. Can anybody think of where that would be? You might be able to name it if I gave everybody a minute. Cindy, do we have anybody on chat that wants to throw it out there, what they think the most expensive place in the United States to buy groceries?
I don't know. Lee, is anybody taking a guess at that?
No guesses at the moment.
All right,
I know
Cindy,
I would guess like New York.
New York? Okay. Well, so here's the most expensive place in the United States to buy groceries is Honolulu, Hawaii. Which, if you stop and thought about it, you probably figure out, well, yeah, they got to put everything on a boat and ship it over there since it's an island. That could add expense to it. The cheapest place in the United States to buy groceries, Cindy, you want to take a stab at that one?
Like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama,
Well, you're in the right area of the United States, but it's actually
Texas.
Temple, Texas.
Really?
Really. So everybody write a thank you note to HEB and tell them thank you. But yes, Killeen Temple metro area is the cheapest place to buy groceries in the United States.
Wow.
So that report goes on every quarter, but that just gives you a sense of how that could be an advantage for new companies wanting to come into an area to know that they're getting a lot of bang for their buck. Another competitive advantage, the Central Texas Talent Pipeline. So this is one of the blessings that people don't often think about when we talk about Fort Hood. There are more than 800 men and women that transition out of Fort Hood every month that are looking for civilian jobs. And as many as 38 to 40% of those men and women said that they would stay in Central Texas if there was a job here for them to stay for. This is a ready-made workforce, and employers look at that, and with as much demand as there for highly skilled, highly trained, talented workforce, the men and women that have served our country that are transitioning out, have great opportunity, and employers are very focused on that. It just so happens on November the 4th, we have a huge regional hiring event, and it's actually at Central Texas College in the Anderson Center, which I'm trying to remember. I think that's like building 254, or I don't remember, Cindy, what the building number is. But the Anderson Center, you can't miss it. One of the biggest buildings on campus. But it's called Hiring Red, White, and You. And it's for transitioning military, their spouses, their families, but it's open to the public. We have about 38 employers that are showing up. So a huge event, but employers take advantage of that transitioning military. And it's something that even back when I was in economic development recruiting companies, I would tell them the talent pipeline that was here, their jaw would drop. They almost could not believe that there was that kind of resource in the area. So it really makes us very strong. And it's one of the reasons why you see the region continue to grow. So I want to introduce you. Some of you may know him, but in case you don't, I want to introduce you to Ulysses Everett Mcgill. And if you know Everett, you may remember him as one of the Soggy Bottom Boys. And I don't know how many of you have actually seen the movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? If you haven't, that is your homework assignment. You need to go watch that movie. And what happened to Everett in the movie is his vehicle broke down while he was on his Odyssey. And basically the story of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is Everett takes some of his friends on an Odyssey, and they're going to, it's a big scavenger hunt, so to speak. But his truck breaks down. He goes into a general mercantile and he asks about a truck or part for his truck so he can fix it to get back on the road. And the clerk of the general store tells him, I don't have the part. I can order it for you. It'll take it about 2 weeks to get here. And Everett very emphatically says, I do not have 2 weeks. I need the part. And he said, I don't have the part. I can order it. Take about 2 weeks. Well, if you remember from the movie, Everett is a Dapper Dan man, and he likes his hair gel. And so while he was in the general store, he decided to get some more hair gel. And he asked for a can of Dapper Dan. And of course, the clerk in the store responded to him, I don't have Dapper Dan. I have Fop, but I can order Dapper Dan. It'll take it about 2 weeks to get here. And if you saw the movie, you remember Everett got very frustrated and he said, I don't want Fop. I'm a Dapper Dan man, damn it. And then he followed up by saying, well, isn't this place a geographical oddity? It's 2 weeks from everywhere. And that's what Central Texas is when we talk about a geographical oddity, because whether you know about it or not, there is a micro region, and there's only about 9 of them in the United States, but it's called the Texas Triangle. And the Texas Triangle is literally, if you took a line and drew it from Dallas to Houston to San Antonio back to Dallas, that's the Texas Triangle. 85% of the population of Texas lives in the Texas Triangle. In Central Texas, our area is right smack in the middle of the triangle. We are 2 hours from Dallas, 2 hours from San Antonio, and 2 hours from Houston. That's what makes us a geographical oddity, not to mention just the amount of growth and the resources that are in our region. So with that, that's the covering all as many bases as I can. I certainly want to have the opportunity to have discussion or answer some questions that you may have about workforce, economic growth, or whatever. So Cindy, do we have any questions, or is there anything that we need to talk about?
Lee, are there any questions so far?
No, there's not.
Well, I have a question. I noticed when I moved here that First of all, thank you for all that information. That was so much information. That they gave us a clear picture of what is happening here job wise. But I often wondered when I first moved here, I realized that there was a lot of military families. And a lot of the jobs or in retail and restaurant or constantly turning over employees because the families of the military are here for 3 years and then they're gone. So, do you find that that is a problem with businesses having trouble getting jobs here because of that?
Not typically, and more times than not, unless you're a franchise owner, maybe management position, the retail industry's very accustomed to kind of short term. Typically, they'll have people use that as a stepping stone to another job, or they're trying to move to a management position, but it has not impacted a great deal. One of the things that we are seeing is with the growth of one of the biggest growing industry sectors is technology, uh, information technology. What's really come on pretty strong lately is you're beginning to see a lot of work in cybersecurity. Those companies really like the benefit of the military because many of those men and women already have security clearances, and many of them have experience in cybersecurity because it was a function that they were familiar with while they were serving the country. So there are more pros than cons, um, and we typically have found that, like I said, about 38% or so. That number kind of fluctuates a little bit, but more than a quarter of those individuals, they may have moved here from Virginia, Florida, wherever, but they found out very quickly that they liked Central Texas. They liked the proximity of things around them. Like I said, being raised in Austin, I enjoy being here because it's easy for me to get. My parents still live in the house I was raised in. I can get to their house in about 50 minutes, but I don't have to deal with the traffic and all the issues down there. I can come back home, and but the proximity is nice, so it's been very appealing, I think, to most of the workforce, and the employers haven't had a lot of issue with it. The biggest issue currently, and we already alluded to it, is just the sheer need of finding help. We had a hiring event not long ago, and it was specifically for food service and entertainment accommodation businesses. And Whataburger showed up, and we all love Whataburger. That's kind of one of our homegrown uh, things in Texas. And I happened to ask the manager if she felt like she benefited from the hiring event. Excuse me. And she said that she actually got 7 or 8 very good qualified candidates from the hiring event that she was going to follow up with, and felt like there was a real connection there. But she followed that up by saying, "But Charlie, just so you'll know, pretty much the way things are right now, if you can fog up a glass, we'll give you a job." So that's how just crazy that job market is, especially in some of those service-based or service area industries. So
Yeah, I
that'll continue to be a challenge because they continue to grow, and they're kind of outgrowing. The news stations. They always want to talk to me about this, and I tell them at the end of the day, we just literally we're very blessed because we literally have more jobs than we have people. Um,
right.
and it doesn't
Well,
make it easy, but that I think that's better than the reverse.
yes. Oh, yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Well, speaking of IT, I know that the Richardson Plano area just boomed with the IT corridor. Do you see a new IT corridor building in Austin and out toward this way because we're more, it's affordable to live? Do you see that conglomerate of business sector heading our direction?
I do. I certainly don't know if we'll ever be the 800-pound IT gorilla that Austin is. But I can tell you, when I was growing up in Austin, you either worked for state government or the University of Texas or IBM. If you didn't work at one of those three places, you didn't have a job. My father worked for the University of Texas for 30 years. Those were kind of the industry giants in Austin, other than your typical hospital and school district and all that. So Austin hasn't always been Austin. And as a matter of fact, someone told me not long ago, they were just like, man, I bet that was really cool growing up in Austin because it's such a cool city. And I always tell them, if you think it's cool now, you should have been in Austin like in the 80s and the 70s. That's when it was really, really cool. And it wasn't trying that hard to be cool. It just, cool was just there. So I do think any community can get that organic growth and develop that culture and that personality. And I do see that business coming north. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, it is getting difficult to move around in Austin. There is a lot of congestion. It's hard to maneuver. The other thing is people still like to have amenities. We're fortunate that we've got two wonderful lakes in our region. We've got beautiful parks, plenty of outdoor opportunity, and good or bad. And I can say this since my parents still live there and they keep me informed all the time. Politics plays a lot into it also. And sometimes communities get a, kind of a political feel to them, and some are good with that, some don't prefer that, so they want to go somewhere that maybe is a little more conservative, or somewhere that's a little more business friendly. I think Central Texas experienced some of that too, and I do also believe that there's a lot of folks that around here we always I remember the first time I ever heard them on the firing range at Fort Hood, and I think I literally was in Temple when I heard it. It like threw me a curveball. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was thunder or something. And I asked someone, what in the world what is that noise? It was too consistent to be thunder. And they told me that was the sound of freedom. And I thought, wow, that's really a nice, because you could typically talk to a resident and they complain about it. But here was a resident that told me that it was the sound of freedom. So I think a lot of folks, they like that spirit, and they like that culture, and that's appealing to some folks. And so that, it's like I tell people all the time. Yeah, I think Austin's always going to get theirs and they're going to grow, but not everybody is an Austin person. There's some people that want to live just outside of a Killeen and have some land and be able to go fishing and hunting. And so I think we'll continue to build that culture. And I think especially with the work now that's going on at Texas A&M Central Texas and their cybersecurity lab, their work they're doing in computer sciences, that's really going to grow, because I've already seen that in our public school system being developed, because most of our high schools now have some kind of computer coding certification or program for students. That's an easy pathway to transfer from there to a community college onto a 4-year. So I think you're exactly right, Cindy, that we'll continue to see that sector grow.
Okay. Well, there was also something else I noticed. It did take me a while to figure out that it was artillery instead of thunder.
Yeah,
Yeah, being never living around a military base, I had a little bit
exactly.
of trouble getting used to that. But what I've also noticed here is a lot of the military retire. And so is there, I know you said that there's large millennials, but is there also a large, I mean, I know we'll never compete with Florida in their retirement, but is there a large population of people that choose to stay here after getting out of, uh, the military and then retire? So will that affect the population? Because they still want to work, because us baby boomers will just never stop working.
No, that's exactly right. And no, you're correct. And part of the reason they stay is some of the things that we've already discussed. It's the cost of living, but also a lot of their support services are here between Darnell and the VA Medical Center campus. It's just easy access to a lot of the support services that they would continue to use. I know for the longest, my father is ex-military or veteran, and for the longest, he would drive from Austin to Temple to go to the VA because they did not have a clinic or any type of facility in the Austin area. And they finally kind of upgraded and got a facility down there where he didn't have to drive, but it kept him driving up here to Central Texas on a regular basis. So I think those veterans see those support services and the community efforts, not to mention Texas is still very friendly from a veteran standpoint. You know, they do a lot of legislative things that make it easy for veterans and support veterans even after they're out of the military. So I do see some of those folks still hanging around.
I agree in the friendly.
Yeah.
When I got here, everybody was like real friendly and minded their own business. And I'm going, wow, never really, I was in big cities before that. It's like, why are you
Yes.
so nice to me? You don't know me.
No, I learned my lesson in Manhattan. You know, when I was recruiting companies, you take an Austin boy and I walk down the streets of Manhattan and I'm just saying, howdy, how are you doing? Good to see you. Appreciate you. And people are looking down at the sidewalk and no one talks to you or anything. And I thought, okay, well, I think they either realize, you know, I'm a little out of the element. I'm a foreigner in here. I don't think they quite got me, but I realized very quickly that what I was accustomed to, even in a larger city like Austin, that in large metro areas, you just kind of sink into your bubble and mind your own business and do not make eye contact. So
And that was
it was
in
quite the
Dallas.
education for me in reverse. And I thought, well, no wonder when folks move down into this area, it's such an experience for them because literally where they come from, that's not what is necessarily commonplace.
Right, right. Well, it sounds like Central Texas is great with jobs, cost of living. Should we be like telling people this or keep this as a secret?
Well, I'm not sure that you can keep it a secret. I will tell you one more Austin reference. So I went to Burnett Junior High School right off Burnett Road in Austin. And when I was in eighth grade, we had a planner from the city of Austin show up to our social studies class. It was kind of like an industry day. And he was coming to talk to us about what it was like to be a planner for the city of Austin. And he told us, I'll never forget it just because it was so amusing now that I'm grown and I look back on it. He told us that in their comprehensive planning, they had decided that a good way to go was they were not going to build any more roads in Austin so that they could keep it a nice, small community and be able to control the growth. Unfortunately, now that we see Austin and now that they still have the same roads that they had when I was in high school, no one else read that strategic plan that they weren't supposed to show up because there wasn't enough roads and ways to get around. And so I think what happens, and this is the case with Central Texas, is the word just kind of gets out. Companies are able to look at demographic shifts and they're able to look at growth patterns and they know a good thing when they see it. So I'm not sure that we could keep them out. And much of our growth, as you've already alluded to, much of our growth comes from Austin, Houston, Dallas. There's not a lot of it that comes from out of state necessarily. It's people in our larger metro areas that want a little bit slower and easy life. We get about, I think last year, I'm trying to remember the number. It wasn't huge, but it was roughly just over 2,000 people that moved here from Travis County, or actually moved into Bell County from Travis County. So a couple of thousand a year. Of course, you know, Travis County probably has 10,000 a year moving into it. But I think it's those individuals in the large metro areas that just maybe they're raising a family. They just want a little bit easier life and something a little more affordable. So Central Texas is very appealing. So we'll continue to see growth. And I think what's going to happen is like years ago, you used to have to drive several miles through the country to get to Round Rock from Austin. and now it's all grown together. I think one day we'll think we're leaving here to drive to Salado or somewhere, and we won't know when we left our area and got to, so all of a sudden we're like in Georgetown and we're like, oh, okay, this is Georgetown, because that growth continues to push north.
Yeah. Well, this is a good thing.
Yes.
Because I used to be in the Bryan College Station area and they look to the Killeen Temple Belton area as what they want to be when they grow up. So, this is a good place to be with the growth. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, do we have any questions?
No, there are no questions right now.
Okay. All right. Well, Charlie, thank you so much for visiting with us today. We love having the Workforce Solutions of Central Texas with us because every time you guys come, you give us so much information, that our students can use, that the community can use. And and plus you guys are like fun. Y'all are so
Well,
fun.
we're always happy to partner. Thanks for having us. We'll come back anytime, and try to talk about any of the areas that we deal with. I would just tell the viewers not to forget about hiring Red, White, and You, if they're, especially if they're looking to make a career change. Big event at Central Texas College, Anderson Center, 10 a.m. start in the morning. So be there on November 4th. It's gonna be a big deal.
Okay, well, thank you.
All
Thank you.
right.
And speaking of events, our next big event is October 27th, where we have meteorologist Josh Johns from KXXV TV. And he's going to hopefully give us some answers on what's up with Texas weather. We've all accepted Texas weather, but hopefully he can give us some insight as to what we're truly dealing with. So make sure you guys visit with us then. Thank you so much, everyone, for visiting with us today. We really, truly appreciate you tuning in our virtual events. And you guys all have a great day. Okay. So we will take us out, but don't leave us, Charlie.
Okay.
Okay.